Welcome to this session. My name is Haley Joyle Smith, and I'm particularly excited to moderate this session because I've been focusing on wastewater and water education for over a decade, to the point that I did my dissertation on sustainable sanitation education. And when I first started coming to the Rich Earth Institute, they were the only ones really focusing on education, and that has since expanded. And we've got four great talks today that are going to give us some insight into how students are learning in different forums about urine cycling. All right, well, that'll just start us right back off with Kevin Orner. He is an assistant professor at West Virginia University. After obtaining his BS in Civil and Environmental Engineering from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, he served for 2 years as a water and sanitation engineer in the Peace Corps in Panama. Kevin completed his Master of Science and PhD in Civil and Environmental Engineering at the University of South Florida and is an engineering and training with engineering consulting experience, and was awarded a Fulbright research grant to study the recovery of nutrients and energy in Costa Rica, which is pretty exciting. From 2019 to 2021, he was a postdoctoral researcher in environmental engineering at the University of California, Berkeley, studying nutrient recovery from urine and digestate, and worked very hard to get a toilet in there, if I recall. Another thing I want to tell you about, I will tell you about all of our speakers, is I asked them a thematic question around this concept of a fertile future. And the question was, if you could have your ideal prop that would demonstrate to people the power of urine peecycling, what would it be? And Kevin says he would have coffee as a prop to demonstrate this. And I would love to see maybe a whole pot of coffee for lots of us to drink, or maybe some coffee grounds. You can ask him later. Today, he's going to be presenting on transdisciplinary approaches to sustainable decentralized wastewater treatment and resource recovery in Monteverde, Costa Rica. Take it away, Kevin.
All right, thank you very much for that introduction. I'm going to share my screen here. All right, can you see that all right? Okay, great. Yeah, so thank you very much for that kind introduction. I've been here before talking a little bit. There are 4 PIs for this project. There's myself and Pablo Cornejo. We're both engineering faculty. But what was especially unique about this was that we had 2 anthropology faculty as well, Dr. Nancy Romero Daza and Dr. David Himmelgreen, both in the Department of Anthropology at the University of South Florida. And it was really great to partner with them because they had run an anthropology field school in Monteverde between 2000 and 2015. So they had this wealth of experience just only with anthropology, and I had this great Fulbright experience in Costa Rica in 2018. So it was just this great experience of pulling in engineering and anthropology faculty, all who had previous experience working in this area. We also had an evaluator, and we also partnered with the Monteverde Institute, which has been around for almost 40 years now, which is a great link between research, education, and partnering with the community. So our objectives this past summer, so summer of 2024, was to look at social, environmental, and economic sustainability metrics for different types of wastewater treatment and resource recovery systems. And this first summer, we were especially focused on the decentralized scale wastewater treatment. So we were focusing on septic tanks and composting toilets. And the idea behind this was if we identify different sustainability metrics that could include economic performance, environmental performance, but also social performance, And once we identified alternatives, we could basically compare these alternatives with one another and then present back to the community a recommended alternative. So the benefit of this program is that it's open not just to engineering students, but also anthropology students. We had 2 students each year from 3 different universities: West Virginia University, California State University, Chico, and the University of South Florida. And for this past summer, and then for summer of 25 and summer of 26, we'll have more students there that can participate. And another benefit of this is that there's homestays, so the students not only participate in research during the day, but they also have this cultural experience in the evening with their host families. So the engineering students got to participate in anthropology methods and research, and then the anthropology students got to participate in engineering methods and research. So on the left photo there is some training we did to measure water quality in a nearby stream that was possibly contaminated by wastewater pollution. And in the right, we were just kind of going over an anthropology method of doing some pile sorting. So the students got to, do both anthropology and environmental engineering methods, learn about them, and then put them into practice right away. And Costa Rica is a really great place to do this type of research because 75% of its residents have septic tanks. And a lot of the sludge, once it's pumped, is not treated. A lot of the septic systems are not properly treating wastewater. We found out that a lot of the septic tanks don't have floors in them. So all of the septic sludge and the liquid was just going into the groundwater. And both nationally and locally, there's a lot of initiative to get funding and actually improve wastewater treatment. So we are in like the north central part of Costa Rica, and it's a really nice mix of people who were born and raised in Costa Rica. There's a lot of Quakers actually from the Alabama area who were against participating in US wars and ended up going to Costa Rica because they don't have a standing army. And there's also a lot of scientists and engineers who go there to do research, and they love it so much they just end up retiring there. Another unique thing about this location is that there's only 6,500 residents, but they receive over 250,000 visitors per year. And the other issue is that most of those tourists come in the dry season in Monteverde. So you have the largest demand for water when there's the least amount of supply. And especially in the population center where they do have a lot of septic tanks, there's more and more people, there's more and more buildings. And basically in places where septic tanks and leach fields were sustainable and you had enough space, now you just don't have enough space for a lot of these leach fields. There is a part of the population there that is really interested in composting toilets, one for their ability to conserve water, two because of their reduced carbon footprint, and then this possibility to recycle nutrients, which directly relates to our work here. Some of these do separate the urine from the feces. Some of them just combine the urine and the feces together. But we're going to get into what's working well with this composting toilet initiative and then what things remain to be some challenges. So this past summer, there were 3 septic tanks that the students investigated. They served different numbers of people, were made out of different materials. And then we had 3 different types of composting toilets. One thing that they're really interested in was testing out this earth auger toilet. And they're also trying to figure out how they could get proper heating and pathogen inactivation for the compost. Some of the water quality methods, we're using a probe for pH, conductivity, temperature, and so on. The students use hot kits to measure total nitrogen, total phosphorus, and COD. And then we also partnered with the University of Costa Rica to analyze different pathogens and then different ions. In some of the interviews that the students did, we really got at these perceptions of wastewater treatment, especially perceptions of composting toilets. These were about 45 minutes in nature and kind of got at their perceptions of different decentralized treatment options and also centralized treatment options. We did an anthropology method called free listing and pile sorting, where we basically give them a topic and they would write whatever words they thought of when we told them about a given topic. These were a little bit shorter in duration, about 13 minutes. And just some very brief results of what we found out is that many of them asked, like, what do we do with these compost barrels once they are full? And we found out that there's really no centralized infrastructure in place currently, although there are plans to do so in the future. And another issue is that they hadn't got over this logistical hurdle of figuring out what to do with the full compost barrels because they can weigh almost 200 pounds. So that's still an issue they are trying to deal with. Another big issue that we found out was just the cost of installing these composting toilets. The average cost there was about $700, which is more than the average monthly wage of $400 to $600. So that price is really out of reach for a good percentage of the population there. So there's really this need of having some additional subsidies either from the government or from a corporate level to figure out how more people could choose and then implement this option is that if that's what they decided to do. So overall, we found out that septic tanks could be causing some groundwater pollution, that there are technologies that can provide good sources of nutrients, but there's really a lack of infrastructure currently in place to use these nutrients. So there's really an opportunity here, but there are some economical, social, and environmental hurdles that need to be addressed. So I just wanted to share that there's just an opportunity for, as we think about how to train the next generation of students to address these types of resource recovery issues, this is just one way that I found out to be good at training students to figure out how to address this resource recovery issue. So with that, I'll stop my presentation. I'm available for either a question now or questions after this session.
Thank you, Kevin. We are doing good on time. We could do one question while Abby sort of starts to shift into being able to presenting. Is there any questions you can type them in the chat or unmute yourself to ask or in person if there's someone. Well, I have a quick question while Abby is getting there. Kevin, I'm curious what your students thought about, did they have an opportunity to use urine diversion or these composting toilets themselves and what that was like for them personally?
Yeah, I would say the vast majority, if not all the students had never personally used a composting toilet, but we were able to visit many types of composting toilets there. And in some places, the user interface seemed similar to what they had used for a normal flush toilet in the past. Some were in like very beautiful settings where you could look out into the cloud forest. It was just like a very nice experience. Others had, just seemed like a little bit dirty, but still students were excited to use them and didn't have any issues themselves. However, there are many residents there that in the past had used pit toilets, and they viewed pit toilets kind of synonymously with composting toilets. And for them, there's this like public perception of not wanting to go back to the pit toilets that they had used in prior generations.
Great, thank you for asking that. If you think of other questions, we probably will have a little bit of time at the end where we can open it up for all of the panelists. All right, now we're gonna get to hear from Abby Verney-Fink. She is in person and she is also local to the Vermont area. She teaches science and humans in the natural world at Putney School, which is a private high school in Vermont. Now, the prop that she would like would be some cheese. And this isn't just any cheese. She wants cheese that comes from the milk that's raised on the pasture, that's fertilized by urine, and made from the Puny dairy, Putney, excuse me, the Putney School Dairy. I love that this school has a dairy. I'm looking forward to hearing more. She's going to talk to us today with a presentation called P-Lab, Experiments with Urine Fertilizer at Putney School.
Thanks, Haley. And yeah, come on up. I'll get your slides sharing here. Thank you guys so much for coming. We actually also have some Putney School students with us today.
Fun.
If you want to introduce yourselves as well,
yeah,
feel free.
Okay, so I'm just
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Abby. This is Lucia and Jane, and yeah, we're coming from the Putney School. When we talked about doing this, I thought it makes more sense to have some of the students talk about what they've done. And we're a very, student-forward school, so I'm happy to have both of them with us today. Um, I'm gonna time myself so that I don't talk too long. So this started as a collaboration with Rich Earth Institute actually before I started teaching this class, but the idea was to work with the local organization, sort of get kids off the hill and into the world a little bit, and then also get outside, do some hands-on learning, place-based education, using the Putney School gardens as sort of our laboratory. So yeah, these are just some images from the past couple of years. They were really focused on lettuce plants for this lab. So some context of what was sort of happening in our class at that point. This is for the class called Humans in the Natural World. We've been doing this in the spring trimester. And at that point, they have been learning about soils on campus. Like earlier in the year, we had done some soil testing around NPK testing and pH testing and just soil composition, and also did looking at like GIS maps and stuff. So they had some context about soil and also soil in Vermont in particular. And in the spring, we really focus on climate science and the importance of soil as a carbon sink and in terms of climate change mitigation and what's being done, and sort of just the value of soil and keeping it healthy. And then Julia has been coming past couple of years, and before that, others have come to Putney to talk about Rich Earth Institute and what's happening here, and giving some context for the background research. A lot of what we heard earlier is what the same things that they heard. And from there, so they've sort of armed with this information, and their task is to design a lab to test urine fertilizer efficacy on lettuce growth. And that's sort of, the rest is sort of up to them. So they get to decide what are they trying to test, what's their question, and how will they do it? Like what will their methods be? And then also consider how they're going to measure growth. And they end up with totally different designs of labs, and some of them are testing synthetic fertilizers against the natural fertilizers. So comparing like urea to the urine fertilizer, or comparing other synthetic fertilizers to the urine fertilizer. Some of them end up looking at application methods, like what if I apply from higher up? What if I actually apply close to the ground? And then we also did a little bit of calculating around amount of nitrogen that we're adding to the soil, and trying to figure out if you use a natural fertilizer and a synthetic fertilizer but try to match nitrogen, most of the other things in our soils are actually pretty excessive at school. And nitrogen is, the main component here. And then they collect data for, optimistically 3 weeks. It's usually like about 2 before school ends. The window of getting plants in the ground and fertilizing them and having them grow and collecting data is pretty short. So for about 2, maybe 3 weeks, they collect data, and then they have to write a lab report about their results. And we've been so these two took this class last year, and we're in the class in the spring, or did this lab in the spring, and we were reflecting in the car about how it was about like trying to learn something from the data, but just as much so it was about designing a lab and figuring out what your question is and how can you answer your question, and is your design reflective of actually what you want to know. So I'm going to let them tell you a little bit about what they did and what they learned, and I'll let them take over.
Hi. So last spring I did a lab where I wanted to focus in on the effects of equal amounts of nitrogen in urine fertilizers versus synthetic fertilizers on butter crunch lettuce growth. So my main goal for this lab was to answer the question of, does administering the same amount of nitrogen in urine versus pro-grow affect the number of leaves the lettuce plants grow? So before I did anything, I kind of got into design, and I did this with another partner. So we started by figuring out like what our test groups were going to be. So we divided our 20 lettuce plants into 3 different groups. We had a urine fertilized group, and then we had a synthetic fertilized group, and then we also had a group with no fertilization. So after we had our groups, we kind of decided the amount of nitrogen we were going to use in our fertilizers, and we decided on 1.275 grams. I think that was the recommended amount.
Of the program.
Yeah, of the ProGrow, which was our synthetic fertilizer. So then we moved into calculating what amount of the synthetic fertilizer and urine fertilizer we would need to use to get to that amount of nitrogen. And we found that we needed 23.5 grams of synthetic fertilizer. We used ProGrow for it to contain 1.275 grams of nitrogen. And then we did the same thing for our urine, and we came up with 2.2 liters of urine. But we later realized that there was a calculation error, and it should have actually been 220 milliliters and not 2,200 milliliters. So that probably like affected things a little bit. But anyways, we didn't find that out until after.
We actually looked at it together in the spring, and in
Yeah.
May we were like, these calculations are right. And then we just looked at it
So,
like last week.
like, I don't know
and
how we
those
did it.
calculations are not right.
So after that, we finally determined like how we were going to measure the growth rate, and we decided that we were going to measure it based off the leaf count by the end of the kind of data collection. So now we like kind of moved into planning our plants and everything, and actually collecting data. So on May 1st, which was the first day of the like roughly 2 weeks that we were collecting data, the ProGrow had an average of 6 leaves, and the urine fertilized group had an average of 4.7, and then the non-fertilized group had an average of 5.6. And then by May 15th, which was the last day that we were recording data, the ProGrow had an average of 10.2 leaves. The urine fertilized group had an average of 11. And lastly, the non-fertilized group had an average of 9.7. So even though there was a little bit of miscalculation, the urine actually did the strongest, although it was pretty close. So yeah, I don't know. I guess we kind of got our answer. Thank you.
Okay, for my lab, me and my partner wanted to ask, how does the placement of compost and urine fertilizer affect the growth rate of butter crunch lettuce? So for this, we decided that we only wanted to use natural fertilizers of urine fertilizer and compost because we learned about how synthetic fertilizers over prolonged use can be damaging to the soil, and it can also contribute to greenhouse gas emissions in production. So the 3 questions we wanted to ask: how does the placement of compost affect the plants growing in it? Will only using natural fertilizers improve general soil quality? And how great of an effect will urine have on the growth height of lettuce? So we ended up with 4 groups of 5 plants each: a control, a group with 142 milliliters of urine, a group with compost spread an inch thick about the entire plot plus 142 milliliters of urine, and a group with compost dug into the individual holes of the lettuce plants plus urine. So on the first day of recording, the group with just urine had the tallest plants with an average height of 2.7 centimeters. And the group with compost dug into the holes had the shortest plants with an average height of 1.9 centimeters. On the last day of recording, the group with compost spread an inch thick about the plot had the tallest plants with an average height of 6.6 centimeters. And the group with compost holes had the shortest plants with an average height of 4.7 centimeters. So what we took from this was that placing compost in the holes of the plants was probably not a great idea, which makes sense because compost is there to aid the soil and improve the quality rather than to replace it. And then the second thing we realized was that our group's soil in the compost spread group had a lot more worms than any of the other plots and a lot of our classmates' plots, which we could make the assumption that that meant it was like better quality in general. And it also did the best. So, and then we also realized that there were probably a couple of mistakes in the lab. because as you can see, the control actually ended up doing better than the group with only urine added, which didn't make much sense to us. But yeah.
Yeah, this is an experiment in learning how to design a lab and follow through with it. Yeah, it really sticks with our students at the school. Sort of a rite of passage. The older students are always like, "Oh, the freshmen are doing the pee lab, like bring our jug of pee out." But yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. And it's lovely to have students here and in person for you all presenting their work. If there is one quick question that anyone has for the students or for Abby, we'll go ahead and ask that question while our next speakers are getting ready to present. Anyone have a quick question? Well, I'll ask the quick question then. I'm wondering where are you getting your pee? Are you getting it from the Rich Earth Institute, and are you using a concentrate, or are you diluting it? I was curious about the urine.
So we are getting it from Rich Earth Institute. Sort of when Julia's come to do a presentation, brings a jug of urine with her, or I pick it up, and the dilution, the plants are being watered at the same time that they're applying. And then that's one thing that a lot of students end up testing is like, if I were to dilute this by this amount, by this amount, by this amount, like how does it affect growth? So that is one of the things that they can choose to actually focus on.
Excellent. Thank you. And I love that it's talked about as a rite of passage that the freshmen get to do the P lab. This is fun. All right, next, we are going to have a couple more students, and they are from Wellesley College, and they are mentored by Jane Ward. So I'm going to give you like 3 introductions before they get going. Jane Ward is an MD and has her master's in public health and has also served in the Air Force for 26 years as a flight surgeon and educator. She returned to Centerville, Cape Cod in 2017, and she is a passionate citizen scientist who volunteers on several town committees and organizations to work to improve the health of Cape Cod waters and promote green building, renewable energy, and protect the river herring on Cape Cod. For example, she works with the Green Center and Mass TC. This past summer, Jane, as an alum of Wellesley College herself, was invited to mentor 3 Wellesley student interns that wanted to learn more and teach others about eco-sanitation. So we get to hear from these Wellesley College students today, and we've got Maura Whalen. And Maura is a sophomore. She's an environmental studies and Spanish double major and interested in pursuing research in ecology. Now, Maura would like to have a potato as a prop because it demonstrates urine as a resource, because the potato is so useful for food production, plus it's her favorite food. Presenting with her is going to be Maggie Moo. She's also a sophomore, and she's interested in interdisciplinary work and considering a degree in cognitive and linguistic science with computer science concentration. Now, Maggie, she wants clothing made from urine fertilizer plant fibers. This is because for her, a big element of urine diversion is rebuilding sustainable cycles. She talked a little bit when I asked her this question about fast fashion and the increased use of plastic and fabric blends has made the clothing industry as a whole less sustainable. And so for her, this using urine fertilized plants will literally be more sustainable and would help close the cycle in more ways than one. Clothing for her is also an artistic aspect, and she thinks that self-expression and human creativity is really important. So fiber and clothing for her is her ideal prop. Now we're going to hear from Maggie and Maura. on spreading the word on Cape Cod's golden opportunity, making education on urine diversion more accessible.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay. As we kind of said before, my name is Maura.
I'm Maggie. We have Jane with us as well as our mentor. And then we also had a third intern who couldn't join us today, unfortunately. Michaela, she is a chemistry major, also a sophomore here at Wellesley.
Yeah. Okay. Yep, so just to give a little background on how we came to this project, we were both first years at Wellesley College last year, and we were hired as interns for the Green Center through a Wellesley program called SHIPS, so short internship projects. And it was basically a resource for first year students specifically to gain research experience and internship experience over the summer. So we were both hired to work for the Green Center, learning a little bit more about urine diversion as an idea and how we can help with that cause.
Yeah, and so one of the first things that we did during our internship is we got the opportunity to go visit in person. We got to go to the Cape Cod Coastal Conference. We were very kindly hosted by Jane at her house. And then we also got to do site visits for places like Mass Tech and the Green Center, who are some of the main organizations that we worked with along with the Rich Earth Institute.
Yeah, and so after visiting the Green Center and all these different organizations, we kind of realized that what we were most passionate about for this very big undertaking was specifically education. And we personally, we felt like the information there was a little bit overwhelming and could be inaccessible at some times. So we really wanted to make a difference in education specifically and how we could make that more accessible to the general public.
Yeah, so all of us sort of under this umbrella theme of variety and accessibility decided on our own individual ways of approaching that we all ultimately kind of interwove. Literally, we interwove like links to each other's projects within our own. So Maura focused on a one-stop shop for all things eco-sanitation. I focused on making memorable supplementary materials, and then Michaela really honed in on getting hard numbers.
And just to start, so these are some screenshots from my project that I made. I decided I wanted to build a story map, which if you don't know what that is, it's essentially an interactive website, including a lot of infographics, and it's through ArcGIS, so there's a lot of mapping and data in regards to that. And I thought this was the perfect way to get this information about urine diversion across in very accessible and fun and interesting ways. So I'm just gonna click on this so that maybe I'll just scroll through this really quickly so you can kind of understand what this is like. This is an example of one of these interactive maps, specifically about farming and the cost of farming. And you can like click on it, get like more interesting data. If you're interested, I also included a lot of links on this that if you are interested in one specific part of eco-sanitation and urine diversion, you could learn a little bit more about it as you please. So there's a little more about Cape Cod, which is where we specifically learned about urine diversion and the organizations working there. But there's also this global map, which shows a lot of places are actually working on urine diversion. And if you are in a specific area and want to learn more about that, that's a resource for you as well. Okay.
So for my portion of this project, like I said, I created trying to create memorable supplementary materials. The idea is that these could, with all of our projects really, is that they wouldn't necessarily be limited to just the Green Center. The idea was that they could theoretically be given to any organization to be used as that organization like sees fit. So I have on the screen here 3 examples of products that I made, works, materials. The one on the left, the 3 R's of Peecycling, that is a way where I was trying to make Peecycling memorable in the same way that you remember recycling, trying to get those aesthetically pleasing visuals on there. On the right, you see what is supposed to be 2 parts of an Instagram post highlighting the connection between the water and energy nexus, especially with that image of a toilet and how energy and water are continually intertwined as it makes its way through your plumbing. And then the one that I wanted to talk about the most is this middle one called The Hidden Cost of Phosphorus. That is a zine. If you don't know what a zine is short for magazine. It is basically like a little booklet. What I have here with the 8-page zine, that's one way that you could make it very easily with just a sheet of paper. Zines are usually small circulation, self-produced, printed, and not-for-profit. And it is also meant to be like a low barrier to creating your own zine. A zine could literally be a sheet of paper that's been folded up into a booklet and has your writing on it. So just gonna click through a little bit. This zine, I do have a version of this that is black and white that could be printed on like one sheet of paper and then easily be produced and like handed out at libraries, handed out at the end of maybe an organization is presenting on urine diversion. So sort of thinking about variety and accessibility, I was thinking of ways that people might become interested in urine diversion, and one of those is through phosphorus fertilizers. So starting out with highlighting that phosphorus exists naturally in a cycle, but then the way that we use phosphorus fertilizers now is not sustainable. It breaks that cycle. Followed up with facts about why is that unsustainable, from the mining practices to the nutrient pollution to the cost. I believe this is something that the previous presenters also touched on. And then closing with introducing urine diversion and Peecycling as a liquid gold, as an alternative solution, and then ending with other resources that people could read if they wanted to get involved. So yeah.
And for our final slide, this is just about our third intern who could not be with us, but these are some pieces of her work that she did, sticking with the infographics. And like we said, she was really inspired to work on hard numbers. She felt that that was a very effective way of getting people to understand why this is a very useful and important tool for the future.
She told us, as she explained it, she was especially inspired by her conversations during the Cape Cod Coastal Conference, where they are in the process of presenting a sewering project there, or they have a plan to implement sewering to address nutrient pollution, which is definitely part of the solution. But she heard some people were concerned about what to do if in the meantime, because the sewering plan has a very long timeline, or what to do if they weren't on the sewering plan. So she created this infographic in order to have those hard numbers of what is the cost of nutrient pollution, and then the cost of urine diversion as a potentially more cost-effective method to be used either in conjunction with or as an alternative to sewering.
Yeah.
So then now ending just with what we got out of this project, this main thing that we wanted to highlight as students was teaching young people to be teachers, teaching us to be teachers. Because we as students not only got to learn about urine diversion as a sustainable option, which is really important to us growing up in a time of uncertainty and increasing climate change, but also teaches young people to be teachers and then passing down that knowledge, going back to that theme of creating cycles.
Yeah, and we'd also like to pass it over to our mentor Jane, if she wants to speak a little bit about her experience and her side of things.
Okay, am I on? Are people able to hear me? I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to say hosting these students was fantastic. for myself and for the organizations that we worked for. Bringing in women who were eager learners and very good at communicating was a great way for us to get a fresh look at this topic and help us figure out how do we normalize discussing eco-sanitation with the general public who know nothing about it. So it was a tremendous opportunity, and we really appreciate the work that the women did, as well as to Wellesley College for allowing us to work with them this summer. That come over?
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
that's all we had for you.
All right,
So
yeah.
much.
Great. Thank you so much. We have a comment from Bob Goldberg that your infographics are fantastic. So great job. And I asked, this is Bob talking. I asked earlier for an infographic on septic systems in the US. I got a map by state, but it would be great to have an awesome interactive infographic on a website with data from every community in the US. Go for it. So it's a bit, I don't know if you have a response to that. I think that's more of an affirmation than a question. Does anyone have a specific question? Well, I'll ask a question then. And I'm curious if you have got to pass on the resources that you created yet and seen that people are using them and what that felt like for you to create a resource.
Yeah. So we have been passing our resources on. Who was that they used it in? Was it Richard? I think Richard did use our infographics for presenting to a group of students, which was really exciting. Also just more small scale, but at Wellesley College, being able to spread that because definitely not a lot of people know that. So for me, I'm a part of the environmental activism club on campus, and using my knowledge from the summer internship and bringing that into an environmentally active place on campus has been really great.
Yeah, and then I know also at the end of our internships, I think all of us provided like final versions of our work. I think if we had like ideas for things that we couldn't quite get to, we also shared that. And then we also shared like versions that could be edited as well for, again, that idea of variety and accessibility, ensuring that multiple people would be able to use these and then being able to change them as they needed as well.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, very, very impressive and encouraging. We appreciate your contributions. All right. So next we have Julia Cavicchi, which I don't know how much of an introduction she needs, but I'm going to give it anyway. She is the incredible education director at the Rich Earth Institute. She runs the Rich Earth's Urine My Garden home gardening education program, local community engagement, youth education, and this Rich Earth Summit. She is committed to ongoing journey of exploring how reclaiming our waste can fertilize social change. Julie's nutrients get split between the Rich Earths Community Peecycling program and her own veggie garden. Julia, I'm going to pause. This isn't just about her bio, but I want to take a moment to just acknowledge how her contributions over the years and dedication to education around pea cycling has been transformative for the country and in the world, making resources and her positive attitude. So a personal thank you, Julia, for all of your work. And her future prop actually is not in the future. It has become a reality. Several weeks ago, she was on a pea cycling themed canoe trip, and her decorations were pea drop flags that were held up by sunflower stem poles that were fertilized with urine. So someday we're going to get a photo of these. And today she is going to share with us how an adaptable K through 12 Peecycling lesson plan.
Thanks so much for those kind words, Haley. And to those of you coming to the open house, we have those flags at our open house so you can see them in the flesh. And it's more of a K through 8 lesson plan as I've been thinking about it, but I'll get going here with these slides. Thanks so much, Haley. So yeah, I thought I'd share just a simple lesson plan I've been doing in some local schools, both in our watershed here in the Brattleboro area and also in some other sensitive watersheds that we have education programs in. So the kind of two main goals of this lesson plan are to engage youth in our local community. We have a community urine recycling program here in Brattleboro. So engaging folks whose families might already be urine donors to deepen their understanding about why they collect their urine, or for those who aren't, maybe they might start conversations with their families about it. And similarly, in other watersheds where we have education programs, like in the Lake Champlain Basin program, planting those seeds of thought about nutrient cycling in those areas. And then also more broadly to encourage curiosity and creativity about the fate of our bodily nutrients, and starting those conversations young can only help the cause. So the lesson plan I've been using has kind of 5 main components. The first is I teach them about our local program. Then we watch a Uri animation video. And then we have a little act it out activity, and then drawing activity stations, and then a share and reflect moment at the end. So for the introduction, I start with a few just simple slides about how our urine nutrient reclamation program works, to ground this concept in reality, and also for local students, they might have seen some of this infrastructure out in the community. So starting with things that might be familiar to them and explaining the nutrient cycle story behind what they've seen. And then we watched the Urination animation, which was co-designed by the University of Michigan, University of Buffalo, Rich Earth, and some other partners as part of a prior NSF grant. You can watch it at this URL. I can also put it in the chat. And there's a charismatic P drop who walks you through kind of the science behind urine recycling, which gets a lot of laughs from the students. And then we have a little acted out activity where I have these just 4 simple cards that unfurl. I start with them all stacked up. So you just see the first step and we kind of talk through with the students kind of what's happening with the nutrients as they go along this journey. And then we have students who come up and act out the role of nutrients and see what happens with their bodies when they do that. So I ask prompting questions as the students come up to hold the different cards so they can think about where nutrients are coming from and where they're going, and try to guess what the next step is going to be before it's revealed. So we have grow and eat, and thinking about kind of following how the nutrients are working for the plant or for our bodies at each of these different steps. And then kind of ending with the flush step, which kind of prompts some of the more interesting conversations about what students know about what happens when they flush the toilet and where that waste goes, and connecting that to their understanding of local rivers or coastlines that might be near where we are. So once we have students all lined up in that, there we go, linear nutrient flow, then I have some volunteers to play the role of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and some volunteer fish to be swimming in our watershed at the end of the line. And we do little actions to act out the different steps, and then they see that they've all kind of accumulated in this watershed and are bumping into the fish and kind of jostling around and creating this kind of clogged up watershed situation. So then I ask them, and they've had some prompting information with the video and the presentation beforehand, how we might rearrange those steps to protect the fish and not create such a clogged up problem in the watershed. And somebody invariably says, we should make it into a circle. And so then I pull out a little golden connector I have in my back pocket that connects flush, which actually flips around to become save, and connect that back to grow. And the students rearrange themselves into a circle. And the nutrients can then do their actions again and find out that they can actually dance around in a circle around the signs in perpetuity. So there's the little golden connector making it into a cycle. And I have a little video of the dance around the dance around the nutrients. And so we've done this at various kind of youth environmental summits and water festivals and also local schools that we'll go to. And then we have the activity stations. So there's 3 main stations I've been using. One is to invite students to imagine how they might inspire other people to become a urine donor with a urine donor advertisement. One is to draw their own urine fertilized produce label. So they imagine they're a farmer and think about what crop they might grow using their pee and how they might communicate about the way that was grown to their potential customers. And then kind of, especially for the younger kids, more simply, they can just draw their own nutrient cycle and think about what kind of toilet and what kind of plant they might fertilize in their own cycle. So I thought I'd just share a few examples of student drawings, and I've kind of grouped them in loose themes. So here you see a student has kind of invented sort of like an organic certification label, the P certified pea drop that he's put on some potatoes and bread and peanut butter. I don't know if you can see it back there, but there's 2 peas in that peanut butter label. And then kind of similarly ideas of like aligning it with support your local farms, support your locally made fertilizer. And this student who said, don't pee selfish or else you won't live to see fish. JK, JK, sorta. Another theme is students kind of just uplifting the importance of trust. So the student made a label that says save, use, trust, grow. And then this label over here says powered by people's pee, trusted by farmers. This is a little cartoon that a student made, which I'll just describe to you as he described it to me. So we have a little man here who's feeling suspicious about the bad mine compost facility of mined compost, which he's gasping at. And then it says, pea man, go. And he pees on this little plant who then springs up and gives the bad mine compost facility the boot. So it's the urine fertilized plant gives the bad mine compost facility the boot. Here we have Peecycling. Donate your pee now. You can see some pee drops in the soil there. And then there's also just a lot of students who like make really beautiful, charismatic, like cute pea drawings. So these are a few I donated to a Peecycling world. Some very cute pea drops over there up in the cycle. One student for her urine donor ad had the idea that we should get influencers on board. So this is Kim Kardashian up in the top left with a pea drop necklace saying, I became a pea cycler just like you can. Also some urine fertilized peas, which technically are nitrogen fixing, but that's kind of a higher level conversation with students. This pea drop saying, I see gold in your future. Come and get me at Rich Earth Institute. And then there are kind of drawings that students make, kind of imagining what the infrastructure of urine recycling might look like. So we see a big pea pipe that a student has invented here, connecting a house to maybe a processing facility. We see a high-rise building with a toilet and a very long pipe connecting to a truck and some storage tanks and a little pasteurizer and some plants and a aspirational urine pickup truck that's entirely shaped like a pea drop. And then just a couple on the theme of like changing perceptions. The one on the right here is actually from a student who earlier in the year had come and done a tour at our research facility where we have a demonstration garden, and we had tastings of our urine fertilized watermelon for the students. And so he was remembering that when he went to his draw urine fertilizer produce label station. And at first he wrote, I think watermelon is intended to convey watermelon. He wrote none at first. And so I was asking him, like, what are your thoughts about that? Why did you write, it shouldn't be urine fertilized? And then he was kind of remembering his experience about eating the urine fertilized watermelon and that it did taste fine. And so he kind of changed his mind and said, juicy pea melon instead. And then this is a conversation of a little family at their toilet, where the person in the pink is saying, flush the toilet, sis, just do it. It will go into the septic system. And she says, fine. And then the little kid says, wait, you can reuse your pee and it can go to the farmer so it can help grow food. So just kind of, I thought it was interesting that the student chose to depict dialogue as a way to maybe encourage people to become urine donors. So I'll just end with a little like invitation. I would love to see more people doing youth education like this. It's a lot of fun, and I think like planting those seeds young is really exciting. So I would love to start at some future summit, like we have our Golden Funnel Award, a Golden Droplet Awards competition where students submit their own projects and present about them, just like Putney School students just did. And we can uplift more youth voices at the summit. Just a few like sample other project ideas. We heard about experimental design with the Putney School. There's also like you can engage your school in like theoretical planning of what urine recycling infrastructure might look like at your school. You could do surveys and interviews to learn about social perceptions of others at your school, like what would they call a urine fertilizer? How do they think about using urine as a fertilizer? You could also do story gathering projects, so talking to your family or neighbors about if they have used urine as a fertilizer before. We actually have a submission form on our Fertilize with Urine website for sharing more kind of long-form story experiences with home gardening with urine. Or you can create your own urine recycling invention and present what invention you would like to see at a future summit. So a few examples of other student projects that folks in our area have done. Django Grace was a high school student at Brattleboro Union High School who did an independent study project on helping make his school more sustainable. And one of the strategies that he presented to the school as part of their sustainable planning process was integrating more urine recycling into both their porta potties and also potential future developments at the school. So he talked with Rich Earth a little bit about what different options might be available for the school. There were also some Hanover High School students up in New Hampshire who did a similar project and actually presented to their school superintendent and got him excited about urine recycling at Hanover High School. And then this is before my time, but Kim may remember, these are the Blue Whales, who were a Lego team who invented the plant-producing porta potty, which is a urine collecting porta potty. And they made a little skit video where a urine truck comes and pumps out the porta potty and talks to a farmer about using it as a fertilizer. And you can find this video in our blog on our website, which I quite recommend. The students did a great job of explaining why urine recycling works and why it's important for the watershed. So just to end with some takeaways of kind of what I've learned from doing youth education. Really, especially younger students are very naturally curious about their bodily functions. So it's a great time to engage them on the topic, especially before kind of some of the older ages, you get a little more sense of kind of fear of talking about it or shame that starts to set in, but starting younger seems helpful to keep that conversation open. Also starting with their own experiences about what they know, what they already know about how plants grow, what they need to grow, and where their waste goes. Also embracing humor as an on-ramp, channeling silliness into creative activities. It's like, there's often, a lot of laughter and like, oh, that's a ridiculous topic. Are we really going to talk about this in school? Kind of at first, but then that energy can kind of flow into creativeness throughout the lesson plan. And then there are always going to be some students who just kind of say, oh, wow, this is so gross. Do I really have to talk about this? And I think just prompting them to explore their curiosity around why they're having that response and just investigate it a little further, I think has been a helpful approach to that. And also just planting the seeds of a positive understanding about what happens to our waste before the kind of flush and forget mentality sets in. And finally, just they have so many creative ideas about ways to communicate about this with others and different places we might try to do urine recycling. The number of times students have invented things that Rich Earth is actually like trying to do in the real world has really blown my mind away. And so just questions for you all to think about are, I would love to hear any feedback on other things I could add to this lesson plan or places I could take it. And other ideas you have about ways to engage younger students in the conversation around urine recycling, and potentially ideas for future Rich Earth summits. So with that, I'll pass it back to Haley. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Julia. You're doing such great work. I'll see if anyone has a question for you quick before we will have Oh, we will not. We are right on time, actually. Does anyone have a specific question for Julia? Well, if there's no questions, I'll let you know that in the chat, there was mention that adults could also use this curriculum. I would love to see some adults running around, clogging up with the fish and the NPK and then doing a circle. And so I also see how you went from going from K through 12 to K through 8 for that particular topic. I want to honor everyone's time, and we are right at the close of our session. Thank you. So, is there something I should know?
So yes, so the other session is running a little long, so we actually could have 5 more minutes here. And there is an in-person present question that we're going to take if any in-person people who had a question want to come up to the front. And yeah.
Great. So wonderful.
Thank you.
I was just curious, when you are working with students, I know you said like later you see that there's this kind of hesitation to talk about it. Do you know like what age do you see that happening? Like, is it like a swift drop off, or is it kind of like the 5 through 8 are like more suspicious? I don't know. Have you seen a trend?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say generally around 5th or 6th grade but it also like it really varies student to student, and like there's kind of more skeptical students in every grade and more like really excited to act out peeing students in every grade. So yeah.
This might be kind of ironic because you've taught me, but like, how do you adjust the lesson plans for high schoolers?
Yeah, so this particular lesson plan I've mostly been doing more for elementary and middle, but I think the way that I've been adapting it for older students, and I have done it in high school a couple of times, is making the questions that I ask at each of the steps more complicated. So for example, for the first step, instead of asking like, what do plants need to grow? And students say sunlight, water, soil. I might say like, where do farmers get their fertilizers? And then students can talk about what they know about the Haber-Bosch process, which is explained in, and there's 2 versions of the Urine animation video. There's a 3-minute version that's simpler that I'll often play for younger students. And there's a 6-minute version that goes into some of the more kind of active research questions. So another way I adapt it is kind of sharing some kind of questions that we currently have that we're thinking about and encouraging students to kind of contribute to that thought process. Yeah.
We do have a question online from Carol McCreary.
Hi, this is a fantastically inspiring session. I was wondering if some of these wonderful ideas can be formally integrated into class at the state level. And I'm thinking that's done in the Pacific Northwest, both in Washington and Oregon. A nonprofit or a group can suggest materials. Is this done elsewhere?
I'll first see if there's anyone who'd like from the panelists to respond, and if not, then I'm happy to. If there's no panelist, Carol, I'm familiar with national and state standards, and it is, you could make suggestions that could be alternative information that get tied to how you teach curriculum that is already established as learning objectives. So for instance, if they need to learn about the water cycle, that might be one way that you could like slip in teaching about urine cycling. Adding in curriculum and education at that level is a lot of bureaucracy, and often what comes back as a pushback is, well, what information do we not teach? Because if you add something and not. So I agree with you. I think that adding in nutrient cycling and having urine cycling as part of a standard curriculum is a goal. I might even say it's like a personal goal for me that we will see that in the coming years. And there is quite a process, but having these demonstrations and starting at the state level would be helpful. So that's a great question. Jane, would you like to ask another question?
Well, I was just going to answer that relative to Cape Cod. I'm not familiar with the curricula in the K through 12, but I do know that one of our towns, Falmouth, that was mentioned for the home of the Green Center too, they have incorporated composting into all their schools in the last 12 months. And it's also, so it's become, the kids are doing it hands-on from the cafeteria, and it's become part of their curriculum. And in the Barnstable High School, there actually is an environmental studies track. It's a non-college aimed track. They have a greenhouse, they do composting. And I think that adding urine recycling, urine diversion and that eco-sanitation could possibly be suggested to the faculty leader. But I don't know about making it a mandate. I think it's possible, but I think right now it's school district by school district.
Carol, you were on mute. Did you have a response to that?
Thank you very much. I was referring to the alternate lesson plans or supplementary lesson plans, but how they would slot in officially. And I'm going to look into that myself, as our local schools do have, everyone has a big community garden and everyone has composting. We do not have it officially at the city or county level, but the schools have it. So thank you for your inspiration.
Yeah. It reminds me, all of the students in Georgia have to learn about agriculture, actually. So another example of a potential place within a curriculum that is a standardized across the state would be agriculture, as an example. How are we doing on time, timekeepers? Do we have it, or do we have any more questions, or do we have time for discussion?
I think we might have one more in-person question. Jolie, if you want to come on up so the folks on Zoom can hear you. She was asking if it was a good road into the parents. And I would say, because I also do a lot of tabling at community events, and so that's when I hear the kind of feedback loop of that a little bit. So most recently I was at a Fairy House Festival up in Bellows Falls, where I did make a urine recycling fairy house. And it was interesting to hear there were a couple students there who were at presentations I had done before who were talking about it to their parents. And then there were also parents who were explaining to their kids that were at the festival about urine recycling as well. So I saw it happening both ways there. So I think it does trickle around.
Ask a question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. So I also did, or this summer, I work at a camp in Watsonville, actually, where Ryan Smith and Elisa, who presented yesterday, I got to see their wastewater treatment plant, the one that Ryan worked at 2 years ago. And this year, I was like, I teach theater at this camp, and I said, we're going to do an engaged project. It's all around these agricultural fields. The first session, we did it all about strawberry farmers and all these issues. We made an amazing play in like 24 hours. And the second session, I said, okay, so first session, we did what comes in. Second session, we're doing what comes out. We're going to the wastewater treatment plant, and we're going to make a play about, something at camp. And I had a rebellion. The kids were not interested. I had people who came up to me and said, I don't want to go to the wastewater treatment plant. Like, I want to switch, specialties. I want to be in surfing now because I don't want to do the drama anymore. I've been doing this for 14 years. That's never happened to me before. And I had a lot of kids who came to the wastewater treatment plant and just spent the whole time being like, oh my God, I can't. Mostly girls. Yeah, that's what it was. I spent a lot of time with that. And we did eventually switch tacks because it was just like, I didn't have the buy-in. So I just share that as it doesn't always work, but also I'm really curious from you, Julia, from our other high schoolers who are here, from the Putney School, from our other panelists, other tips about like how else to head off the ick factor. Because I really yeah, I felt like I had a lot of tools in my arsenal, and maybe it was just because it's a fun program. It's not school, that environment is different, or that I've also experienced, like, if there's a strong ooh factor early on by a popular person, that can help the tunnel. So I'm just curious, other feedbacks or tips of how you navigate this from anyone else. I'll take my answers off the screen.
I think one of the ways that we normalize it at Putney is that we're really rooting it in science. We're saying that this is an experiment and that this is like something that other people are also doing scientific experiments on. So we're really leaning into like, what is the point of this, and less like, what literally is it? And actually sometimes they may vouch for this too, but sometimes I feel like students become less gross out than me at points where they're like, I'm like, do you want gloves? And they're like, no. I don't know. But I think they're leaning into the like science piece of it, which is totally different than your situation. Works really well for us that this is beyond just what we're doing right here, and that we're part of a bigger picture. And Julia coming helps that too.
Yeah, I think my answer is going to be similar. I think showing the Urine animation video like goes a long way to like legitimizing urine recycling, because at first when kids hear me talk about it and they see the local infrastructure, some of them might still be thinking like, oh wow, this is like a weird, interesting thing happening in Brattleboro. But in the video, you also see there's a moment where it shows like on the map where people around the world are researching urine recycling. And lately I've also, to my what's happening locally slides, I add a couple slides about like they're doing this in Paris now. And there's 3,000 farmers in Niger who are using urine as a fertilizer. So talking about like the commonness of it, and having voices coming from multiple sources telling you about it, I think helps legitimize it a little.
There's a quick answer there. I think that I want you to answer also.
Answer where?
I think she had her hand
up. Jane, did you have a question?
Or an answer to that?
Or an answer, sorry.
No, I just was going to comment on that.
Yeah.
When I put together the application for the Career Services Office at Wellesley, I thought, this is going to be interesting. I don't know if there are going to be any Wellesley students that want to do an internship on urine diversion. And I had 6 applicants. I was actually kind of blown away. So in terms of getting the students' reactions, I would ask Maggie and Maura why, what appealed to them, because there was none of that, horror or anything. And when they came to visit the Cape, we started out at Mass TC where they test, septic systems. We were on a 2-acre plot where they had 20 or more different septic systems. So at least in this group, there was not an ick factor. There was a curiosity, I'm guessing. But ladies, maybe you can chime in on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think at least for me, I mean, like as someone who wants to pursue like science, I think you kind of get over that pretty quickly. And I also like sustainability is really important to me. And obviously this is a very important way to live sustainably on Earth. So it was much more a fascination and interest in how this could be possible, less than an egg factor for me.
Yeah, I think for me, as someone who doesn't necessarily have like a formal background in environmental sustainability, I had at that point when I applied, I think I was in the middle of taking a class called Indigenous Environmental Planning. So it was all about how do we bring Indigenous voices and indigeneity, and how do we do that respectfully? How do we intertwine it respectfully with like the planning process, for example, like urban planning projects or other kinds of projects that you might be doing. And so it was thinking about sustainability in a different way, in a way that is not, at least in the US, obviously it's a marginalized perspective. And so it was just, I think that was, at that point, I was sort of thinking of like sustainability and the different ways in which, like the different factors of it. And so when I saw the description of the project, my first thought was like, oh, that's an area of sustainability that I haven't really thought about. And I feel like that's like a significant gap in my knowledge of like the sustainability of human waste. And just thinking about like the necessity of humans and the roles that humans play like as a part of nature. So that's where I was coming from. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for this.
Haley, can I say something about that as well? Sorry. We're still waiting for the other group to come in. I don't know, Mike, if you want to just poke your head and see if they're going to come soon. But I wanted to say, I think what was just, sorry, I'll say what I want to say. I think it's really reasonable for us to still need to engage with folks who are like, no. I think we're really used to talking to adults, and once there's a level of understanding, that ick factor, we're really used to that really not being there, and I think we're surprised at how little it's there. So when it is, we're like, oh wait, this in certain groups, or if the cool kid thinks it's gross, like we're still going to be having this conversation, and I think it's important to figure out what's happening there. And I think there's something interesting about like, this doesn't need to be your future or like what you end up doing, but I think there might be an interesting avenue of like, there are so many, thank you so much. Sorry, I'm just waving to folks who are heading out. Sorry, this doesn't need to be like your future or your career, but just from the vein of like, there are people who are just like obsessed with mushrooms, or they're obsessed with moths, and like, just let's just glimpse into that world for a second. And then we can step back out. But this doesn't need to be where we live now. It's where we live, but we chose this life. But I think recognizing that somebody needs to choose this life, and somebody needs to be dealing with what's happening down the drain. It doesn't have to be you, but let's just look at, you're putting stuff down the drain. So let's figure out what's happening there, and coming at it maybe from that level of curiosity, but that's also a little bit removed, can maybe be a little bit of a bridge there. But I don't want to like sit in this group and pretend that no one's ever grossed out by what we do. There was, I think, a quote in, I'm forgetting which book it was in, but I think it was from the folks at Soil about like, poop is gross, or like poop has like the capacity for harm, but also the capacity for incredible creation. And let's not forget that those both exist, and we have to find that balance. And so honoring that ick, and honoring that like desire for distance, but also the invitation to let's just like stay on this side of the glass, but peer in. And see what people are doing with this stuff that you're all contributing to. That's my answer. Sorry, Haley, go ahead. And folks are going to start coming back in from the other session now. Is that true? So if you want to close this session, Haley.
Yeah, and I want to speak to Sean's question, and it's kind of dovetails off what you're saying, Jamina, about the ick factor and how I address it with people. Is I tell them that anthropologically, and the survival of our species is that we have an instinct to identify things that are potentially dangerous. And then we can learn how to do things in a way that don't make it dangerous. So I find that allowing people to have that experiencing, giving them permission to feel the way that they feel, and backing that up with a little bit of like, there is a biological reason of survival as to why you initially have this response. And with education, you can get over that, and we can move forward. And I find that can be very, very helpful. So thank you for this educational, the future is fertile. I have all the confidence in the world, and a wonderful session, and welcome back to everyone else. I hope that y'all's session was fantastic, learning more about biochar. And I think I'll pass it off to the conveners to close. I think we're coming to the close of the day, right?
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much, Haley, for moderating that session. That was a wonderful session.